All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome. I am Matt Riley, CEO of Blueprint, and we are very excited for our next installation in our Careers in Law series. We have a very special guest today, so I would like to welcome Karen Aguilar. Karen, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, and Karen, the resume goes on and on, I have to say, so we have a lot of topics to cover today. But Karen is a removal defense attorney at CHIRLA, which is the Coalition for Humane Immigrants' Rights here in LA. So very exciting, fighting on the front line for immigrant rights, and Karen has some great stories to share with everyone today. She also, in her spare time, also works as an adjunct professor at Southwestern, so I think she has a lot of different perspectives to share. Karen, how are you on this Saturday?
I'm doing great. Very excited to share my story, and hopefully everyone will walk away with some good tips.
Yes, definitely. Thank you so much. And Karen even shared with me she was at the office this morning, so there's a little glimpse into the life of Karen. Now, let me, real quickly, Karen, before we jump into your story, I want to give people a little background on what we are doing here. So Blueprint, so I have worked with thousands and thousands of pre-law students over the years, and there's really a blind spot sometimes. It's hard to find good information about what life looks like as a law student and as a lawyer, and we really want to help students understand the variety of different career paths that are available to people with a law degree. So we are kicking off this series, and we're talking to a lot of people doing fun, interesting, exciting things in different areas of law to hopefully help students kind of get a better idea for what's out there. And then very excited because specifically we are starting off this month with careers and people like yourself who work in public interest, really focusing on issues of equality and social justice. And with everything going on in the country right now, all of the focus, the spotlight on racism and systemic inequality and things like that, I thought it was a great way to kick things off and really give students a better idea of what lawyers are doing to affect social change. And so that'll be our focus today. As you know, we work with a lot of people who are much earlier in their journey than you, so any words of wisdom and advice that you have would be really great to share. And one quick note before they get mad at me, I did want to say Karen is happy to answer questions. So if you have questions for Karen during our webinar today, feel free to use the chat box. Make sure to set it to all panelists and attendees so that everybody can see the questions, and I will do my best to pass on some of those questions to Karen. Okay? All right, Karen, you ready to jump in?
Let's do it.
All right. So now, I want to spend a lot of time obviously focusing on your career and what you're doing, but before that, we're going to jump in a time machine and go back in time. And we want to check in with Karen in her earlier days before she became a successful attorney and talk about what got you there. So, one more slide. Here's Karen with some highlights. We will get to all of that. But like I said, let's go back a little bit before law school. So talk to me a little bit about your childhood growing up and what first got you interested in pursuing law as a career.
Sure. So I grew up in South Los Angeles, and I continue to live in South Los Angeles. I am the daughter to a family of refugees from El Salvador. And for many folks who are first generation like myself, we tend to have the experience of being at the forefront of issues that impact our families. We often find ourselves being the interpreters and the translators to help our family navigate the systems of this country. And I think from a very early age, I knew that my position, not only within my family, but within my community, would be to be a voice and to be an advocate. And I think I knew as early as middle school that I wanted to be an attorney. My perception of attorneys were that they were articulate and that they knew how to defend themselves and that they knew how to defend other people. And I think when you come from a background of feeling a little bit defenseless, you have that desire to know more. And that to me is what inspired me to want to become an attorney.
That's a great story. And Karen, talk to me a little bit about, because one of the things that we hear from students is when you don't have people in your family, people in your community who are practicing as attorneys, it's hard to find examples, or no one gives you the roadmap for what life looks like on your way to becoming an attorney, and obviously that can be intimidating. How did you overcome some of those hurdles?
So that is definitely something that I experienced from the very beginning, even through law school and even as an attorney. You realize the value of mentorship. So for me, yes, I had no one in my family to tell me exactly what was to come. My mother maybe went to school for about a year or two in her home country, so she didn't finish elementary school. She's a janitor. My father was a security guard, also didn't go to school. And so I was really the first person in my family to make it past elementary school and middle school and high school. And so that trajectory for me was, it was kind of lonely. And so what I knew, however, is that the circumstances in my life had to change. They absolutely had to change. I grew up in a one-bedroom home, and even though I had everything that I needed, we really lacked privacy and space, and that can cause a lot of stress because there's no real way to disconnect. And so I would see my mother also working from 3 o'clock in the morning to 1 o'clock in the afternoon, and then go to her second shift again from 5 to 9 p.m. And for many years, I also went with my mother to clean houses and clean office buildings in the evenings after school. And you would work that hard to barely have money for your basic expenses. And so, one, I knew that I didn't want my mom to work that hard forever. Two, I didn't want to work that hard to only be able to afford the little that we had. And so what compelled me, despite not knowing what I was getting myself into, were my circumstances. That had to change one way or another. There was absolutely no way that I was going to settle for living under those circumstances. And so basically what I knew that I had to do is just be a good student. Do a good student, do what I was told. And that's what I did, as a minor through high school. Eventually, when I made it into college, I was never afraid to ask questions. If there's one thing my mother taught me, is that a closed mouth does not get fed. And so I did everything that I could to get all of the information necessary. And eventually it paid off because I'm a lawyer now, but there were still things in hindsight, because everyone knows that hindsight is 2020, that I wish someone would have told me, because my circumstances were different.
Yeah, definitely. Well, clearly you use some of that firsthand experience. It's just tremendous drive. I mean, you can see from the things on the slide, you were very successful academically, and it's really inspiring to hear that you use that passion even to drive you today. So talk about turning, challenging circumstances obviously into something positive. So now I want to talk to you a little bit about this. I found really interesting. So clearly you were successful academically, and as you can see, you got into some of the best universities in the country, but you kind of chose a different path. Can you talk to me a little bit about that decision?
Sure. So for me, yes, I was accepted to UC Berkeley. I was accepted to UCLA right out of high school. There were two things that drove me to go towards the community college path. The first thing was that I had never been away from home. And so my life and my reality was really about a miles away from my house. I didn't know life outside of here. And it was scary for me to be away from my family, because I find strength in community. And I was afraid that I maybe wouldn't be as strong outside of a place that felt safe for me. And the second thing that drove me to make that choice of going to community college was money. I didn't quite understand financial aid. And when I was presented with these tuition amounts on an annual basis, and books expenses and cost of living, I couldn't believe that I would have to keep up or think about that for the next 4 to 5 years. I didn't know how to manage it. I didn't know that, financial aid would be enough to cover it. I was afraid of taking out loans. I didn't even understand what interest rate meant on loans. So I was just I just really lacked knowledge about money and how to pay for college. And so for me, what was easiest was just to go to community college. The fees were very low. It was close to my house. I was able to commute. And once I did go to Santa Monica College, I realized that it was very accessible for students like me. Classrooms were small, 30 people per class, and a lot of the professors who were teaching at Santa Monica College were also teaching at UCLA. And so I felt like I was getting the same education for a much lower price, and I didn't have about anything else other than succeeding academically. And I did just that. I finished all of my general requirements in a year and a half, and I had a semester left over. So I thought, okay, well, I know I want to go to law school. I don't have any real work experience. So let me do something proactive. And I enrolled in Los Angeles Trade Tech College, where I obtained a skills certificate as a legal office, like clerical assistant or a secretary. And it gave me some foundation so that I could knock on some doors and get an opportunity at having my first legal work experience. And so I, eventually transferred to UC Riverside, where I had another great experience. I loved UC Riverside. It was a very diverse campus then. It's even more diverse now. And those 2 years were very formative and really solidified my decision to go to law school.
Wow. Karen, thank you for sharing. These are exactly, just to put an emphasis on what you're talking about, these are exactly the systemic barriers that you didn't let get in your way, right? All the way from your childhood to not understanding school and financial aid. It's easy to let any of those get in the way. And I think those are the systemic things that have stopped first generation students from pursuing some of these careers. So it's great to hear stories of where obviously you not only didn't let that get in the way, but kind of thrived through everything. Now I wanted to ask you, you had an interesting quote when you talked to you earlier, and it's down on the bottom of this slide, which pertains to law school. I don't know if this was advice that you actually got or just a little bit of advice for pre-law students, but I believe it was, you'll learn what you need to know when you get there. And you do not believe that that is very helpful advice. Can you give me a little context there?
I remember when I was thinking about which major I would choose to go to law school, I asked so many people what would be helpful, what would help me best prepare for law school. And everyone said, oh, you'll learn what you need when you get there. Like, they'll teach you how to be a lawyer. They'll teach you about the law when you get there. And they're like, just enjoy your undergraduate experience, which is true. You should enjoy school. And so I thought, okay, well, I don't know much about the world. I'm not very cultured. I haven't traveled. And in learning about all these different majors, I chose anthropology. And it was a very interesting major. I did learn a lot. But when I came to law school, I didn't realize that there were certain weak areas for me that I had to work on. I didn't come in with the strongest skill set. And so it was upon that discovery that I thought, wow, I wish someone would have told me how important it was to know how to write very, very well. And I always thought I was a good writer, but when I got to law school, I realized that there was so much more room for improvement and that the standard of performance was so much higher. And what I wish I would have known is that I should have chosen a major or even a minor, just something that would have pushed me towards a better or a higher standard of writing. That is so important and so critical as an attorney. So many times, you write something or you put a declaration together, you put a motion together, and judges read that, and if you can catch their attention and persuade them from that first moment, you're set. And that's what matters. So I learned that, yes, writing is your sword and your shield. And another thing that I didn't know is that in our law school classes, when you sometimes run out of reasons to argue for your client because the law has certain limitations, a lot of people turn to public policy arguments. And I didn't know what that was. And I didn't know how to talk about it. I wasn't conversational in that area. And I realized that I would have benefited from knowing a little bit about that too. And so my advice would be that if you are thinking about choosing a major, yes, it's important to choose something that is interesting, something that you are going to enjoy, but there is a skill set that is very important for lawyers, and that is learning how to write. So if that is not something that is offered in the major that you're choosing, choose something like doing an honors thesis, working with a professor that's going to push you to produce a great written work product, and constantly practice writing. And that, I feel, is going to really prepare you for law school.
That's great advice. It's not what you see on the legal shows on TV, right? It's not as compelling to see people writing briefs, but a lot of times that is what actually wins or loses the case. So. And I do really like there's a common theme coming out through our conversations, which is just do the homework and use the resources that are available. You can go talk to law students, you can talk to lawyers, get a better idea for what a day in the life actually looks like. And I wanted to ask you actually about another resource that I know was impactful for you, and that is the UCLA Law Fellows program. Can you tell me a little bit about that program and what they did to help you along the way?
Yes, the UCLA Law Fellows program is a program that is thriving still, and it's very near and dear to my heart. So the UCLA Law Fellows program is a program that helps usually first-generation law school students who also have the same ambition of going to law school, but need help in making sure that they have the strongest application to make themselves a competitive candidate. And so when I was a UCLA Law Fellow back in about 2010, there were certain, so many benefits that were available to us as a law fellow. First of all, they paid for our LSAT course, which was a huge help. And they gave us several options to choose from so that we weren't necessarily feeling compelled to choose only one program. The other thing that they helped us with, they paired us with a mentor who was a law student. And those law students were accessible to answering all of our questions, and were truly available and meant to be a part of the law school trajectory. Another thing that they did is that they had mock law school classes where actual UCLA law professors would teach. So you get an assignment, you'd have to do a written work product, submit it to your mentor, and then be prepared to participate in a mock class. They also helped us with a personal statement. So we wrote our personal statement. We met with the directors of the UCLA Law Fellows until we were able to complete a perfect work product. They helped us with fee waiver applications for the law school applications as well. And they continue to be a part of my life. I am very supportive of the UCLA Law Fellows program, and they are really a bridge for folks like me to make it into some of the top law schools.
It's actually a program I'm very familiar with. It's an amazing program. It works with students. It's not just a UCLA thing, and there are other programs out across the country. So I would highly recommend pre-law students look for something like that. And that's, that's exactly what we're saying. When you come, maybe in your background, you don't have people that you can talk to. There are still resources out there. You just got to do your homework and make sure that you can find them. Karen, I got a quick question for you, and this one comes from Denise. It says, since you felt like you were lacking a foundation because of your major, what would you recommend to someone who already has a degree that isn't in writing, but is starting law school next year? So essentially, if law school is in the future, you're not going to get it through school, what would you recommend to someone like that?
Sure. So what I did, obviously, because that's the circumstance that I was in, I came into law school realizing that I had to do a lot of work. And so what I did moving forward was that I made sure that every internship and every externship and any volunteer opportunity that I sought, I was very proactive about asking for written assignments and feedback. And so my first semester as a law student, even though they advised against doing any kind of internship and externship, I found a nonprofit where I helped fill out domestic violence restraining orders that had a writing component of a declaration. And the commitment was very minimal. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, it was about 6 hours per month. And I signed up to do that. And every month I would go and help pro se applicants apply for domestic violence restraining order, write the declaration, and get feedback from the experienced paralegals and the supervising attorney. So I made sure that I had writing assignments throughout my first year of law school and even after that. Every single internship and externship, I was comfortable being vulnerable and saying, this is not my strongest point, but I recognize that this is important. These are the type of assignments that I would like to work on. Are you amenable to helping me improve my writing skills? And that's sure enough what I did until I made it to the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, where I was a full-time judicial extern and I was writing for a judge. So I started off being not the best writer, but I worked on it all 3 years simply by asking for those types of assignments and being comfortable saying that I'm not the best at it. And I'm afraid to perhaps turn in something that wasn't that great, only to then turn back around and make sure that I would improve the next time around.
That's great advice. Yeah, get as much feedback as possible. It doesn't happen. It certainly is a different beast than any type of writing that you've done in the past. I did get one quick question. What was the name of the organization you did the writing for domestic violence? What was the name of that?
So it was the Los Angeles County Bar Association Domestic Violence Project. And I know, they still have that program available. They're on the second floor of Stanley Moss Courthouse in downtown LA. And they do accept volunteers. Obviously, I don't know what's happening right now with COVID, but generally speaking, the clinic was inside of the courtroom, and they had amazing paralegals, great supervising attorneys. They do very good work. That's great.
Yeah, definitely. And the Bar Association, always a good place to start. So let me give you, so I want to go to the next. I know there was one other organization near and dear to your heart that played a big role in your journey, and that is the Inland Empire Latino Lawyers Association. Can you tell me a little bit about them and how they helped you along the way?
Yes, so this organization was about a block away from, maybe 2 blocks away from UC Riverside. And I actually learned about this organization through a classmate who was working at that organization. And she asked me if I was interested in volunteering, and that's how I applied. And I, went through a series of interviews to become a volunteer. And I remember after my first day, I absolutely fell in love with the work. And I called my mom and I said, this is it. I want to be a lawyer, but I want to do it in public interest. And so AYELA, that is the acronym for this organization, was the only nonprofit in the Inland Empire at the time that was serving the undocumented community. And so they had a specific grant to be able to help that population. They're a very small organization consisting of about 1 staff attorney and this amazing paralegal who was my supervisor and is now attending law school. And we would have volunteer attorneys come into the clinics that we hosted about 2 to 3 times per week. And so these volunteer attorneys over the years became good mentors for me. And, some of these attorneys were actually the ones who recommended me for the UCLA Law Fellows program and who I continue to be in contact with even now. So those relationships, I just didn't know at the time how important they would be, but the attorneys that I met were very open to sharing their experiences with me and helping me through this process of applying to law school and even the UCLA Law Fellows program. AYELA does fantastic work in helping folks in the areas of small claims, family law, and I believe they may have expanded their services since I've left. It's been 10 years. But at the time they were limited in doing that type of work. And for me, it was just a great experience to know that I was giving back to people, even though I didn't earn a penny for almost 2 years. I felt like the richest woman alive, just knowing that I was able to help everyone else. And quite frankly, if there's something that I truly believe is that when you do good for the world, it comes right back to you. And I may not have been paid, and even though I took it very seriously as a full-time job, to me at least, eventually when I applied to law school, I was awarded a partial tuition that paid 50% of my tuition for the entire 3 years. And I almost felt that maybe that's the money that I would have earned working, but it came back in another way for me in the future. And so for me, doing public interest work has just opened great doors and great opportunities. And we reap what we sow later.
That's great. What an awesome story. And that's, it is sometimes rare to find people who've kind of identified that passion before going to law school. And it must make, all the sacrifices you make to be successful in law school, when you've seen it and felt it, it probably makes all of that sacrifice a lot easier to deal with. So I do have one more question from the crowd. So this is from Angelica and relates to, you found mentors in specific ways. Is there any advice that you would give to people who might not currently have mentors in their life? Like, how can you go out and find mentors, maybe through organizations like this or other ways? If you're post-undergrad and still kind of looking to find that passion like you did.
Sure. So, I mean, if you've been out of, undergrad and you're not necessarily a student, because as a student, I do feel like you're at a certain advantage because you're, in academia and you're probably talking to professors and other students. I still think that even in between that time, there's still an opportunity to get involved in doing community service work. And it takes a lot of, it sure does take some energy and making time in your life. And maybe right now is also just a difficult time to do it given the circumstances that we're living under. But this will pass. And I think that there are always ways to give back to people. And when you are constantly looking for those opportunities, you're going to come across other people who have the same passion and are going to take you under their wing. And so, you don't have to be a law student to volunteer through the LACBA, domestic violence clinic. There are other ways you can, there are so many nonprofits that are just willing to take the help. And so putting yourself in that position, I think it's just the best way. You have to put yourself in the limelight and try to connect with people who are like-minded as well. And I think that that's how you slowly start to open doors. You don't have to be a student, but you can put yourself in the middle of, important issues and important causes, work on them, volunteer, and the right people will walk into your life.
Yeah, it's great advice. And there's, this is Inland Empire, this is what's, Lawyers Association, but there's a lot of others out there, right? No matter where you're in the country, do some homework, try to find it. And I really like the other point that you made, which is, sure, you're volunteering, you're early in your career, you're learning, you're dedicating your time, but look at what it got you, right? You have this well-rounded application. You have to have a competitive application. You apply to law school, not just for admissions, but to fight for scholarship dollars. And then in the long run, that can give you so much more flexibility in your career. So really great advice, Karen. Okay, let's talk about law school. So you ended up at Southwestern. Talk to me a little bit about how you chose the school and what did you enjoy most about your time?
So I chose Southwestern for several reasons. First of all, for me, it was important, even, out of ever since high school, it was important to feel like I had a community. I thrive in spaces like that. And I knew that about myself. And so what I felt from Southwestern Law School, even from the very beginning when I was offered this, an opportunity to interview for the scholarship, and then eventually received the scholarship, I felt that it was validating my experiences and my background. And it felt so welcoming to have a school that with open arms said, we believe in you and we believe in you so much that we're willing to pay for half of your tuition. And that to me was very meaningful. And then going to, I did the tour at the law school and they had, different events for students who were applying and just getting to see how diverse the staff is and the students as well. You can see people coming from different walks of life. And so that for me was very welcoming. And I felt, I've always been of the perspective that, you know, the school doesn't make you, you make the school. And I thought, okay, I feel like I can give something back here. Someone here is valuing my commitment to doing public interest work. And sure enough, they do. They have a public interest program. And that opened just the doors for so many opportunities for students like myself who had those interests. And so for me, it was almost a no-brainer that I was going to go to Southwestern. I got into other schools also that were not necessarily as inviting as Southwestern was. So it was a fairly easy choice for me. And I met people along the way now that continue to not only be my advocates, but I mean, my mentors, but also my advocates. I have one professor there who was my immigration law clinical professor, who actually opened the door for me to work at CHIRLA. I have another professor there who was my civil procedure professor, who is like a father figure to me. And he also continues to advocate for me and constantly checks in on me to see how I'm doing and cares about my professional growth. And so I was right about making that choice, because not only were the professors very you know, an important part of my growth as a student, they continue to be involved in my life as a professional.
Yeah, I find that when we talk to law students and people who have, you know, graduated and moved on, they use those similar types of words. When you visit a school and you know you made the right decision, it should feel like a family, a community. You should really feel at home when you're doing that. So it's great to hear that you experienced that as well. Two more questions on law school. So, Kimmy, what were some of the classes that you enjoyed the most? And then also, you came in with an interest in working in public interest. Was that kind of solidified, and how did you further that pursuit while you were at Southwestern?
Yes, so you know, I'm sorry, what was the first question again?
Sure. What were some of your favorite classes?
My favorite classes, okay. Well, one of my top favorite classes was the immigration law clinic, because I really like hands-on work. I feel like I learn best when I'm actually doing something and putting my knowledge to work. And we have a fantastic immigration law clinic at Southwestern where we have real life clients that we help them apply for U visas and CIGIS status. And so going through that process by having someone walk you through you know, everything from intake to actually filing the application was very meaningful for me. But to be honest, I like school in general, and I can think of maybe 2 classes that I didn't enjoy. I found constitutional law to be very interesting, criminal procedure to also be very interesting. So for me, I'm just a very inquisitive person that likes to learn. And so I just wasn't bored by too many subjects. I found everything to be quite fascinating to be honest.
I won't make you name the 2 classes that you didn't. I don't want to put any professors on the spot here. So, here, I have a good question for you here. So this one is, being a first-generation student while in law school, did you work? And if not, what are some ways you made sure to have income to cover living expenses?
So I did not work. I was only doing, you know, full-time school, and very involved in on student organizations, part of the Latino Law Student Association, Labor and Employment Law Association. I was the president of that, and constantly volunteering, constantly networking. So I was 100% immersed in the law student experience. So what obviously was able to help me was the scholarship that I received through Southwestern. I also received a scholarship through the Mexican American Bar Foundation, which helped me pay for expenses. And throughout law school, I received a lot of little scholarships that helped me pay for books and things like that. I lived at home, so that also saved me the expense of having to pay rent. You know, my mother helped me with that. And you know, my mother was very supportive. So I didn't have to worry about paying food. I didn't have to worry about having a roof over my head at the very least. And other things that I did to supplement my income were take out loans. So I still do have student loans, and I am going to avail myself of the public interest forgiveness program as long as it survives. And so I was counting on that also to help me pay the loans that I do have. The program is basically that if you work full-time, 40 hours for 120 months in the aggregate, then you qualify to have your student loans forgiven without having to pay any taxes on the amount that is forgiven. And so I knew that I was going to take advantage of that program, and I wasn't too concerned about taking out the loans that I needed in order to finish my education.
Yeah, and I think anytime people talk about student loans, they always have a scary connotation, but what you don't want to do is be working full time and trying to be a law student and all the rest of it. And that is just a recipe for disaster. If you can limit loans with available scholarships or anything else like that, then it can actually be a smart investment, right? Because eventually, it'll make you more successful during your years in law school.
Right. You do what you can to keep the loans down, and then there's just some things that are not within our control. And if there's one thing I have learned is to try not to stress out too much about the things that I can't control. And if I inevitably had to have some debt, then I felt that being an attorney and living my purpose was worth that debt.
Always makes it easier. Quick follow-up from the crowd. This comes from Daniel. He said he wanted a little bit more information on this public interest loan forgiveness program. So it requires consistent employment in public interest through, is it 10 years?
10 years. 10 years, that's correct. 10 years, and it has to be full-time. And so every year, my employer fills out a form, basically attesting that I have been there for the last 12 months, full-time. And then we send that form over to the appropriate government agency. And then I get a receipt back, so to speak, that says that my certification has been renewed for another year. And so I saved that, and eventually when 10 years pass, 8 more to go, then I'll apply for my loans to be forgiven.
That will call for a big party.
Yes, that will. And I would definitely say to take advantage of the financial aid counselors at whichever law school that you go to, so that they can make sure that you're taking out the right loans that will qualify for that. And that, I actually did that. Even after I graduated, I went back to, and it must have been not that long ago, like about a year ago, actually, I went back to the financial aid office at Southwestern just to make sure that everything was fine, that I had all my ducks in a row. So if you don't figure it out, even as a law student, your law school should be able to help you and just make sure that you're on the right track to qualifying for that public interest forgiveness.
Yeah, great advice. Your law school wants you to be, obviously it's in their interest, they want you to be as successful as possible. So to keep getting help that you can. And we put if anybody wants to look up the loan forgiveness program, the URL is in the chat box. Okay, Karen, moving on a little bit. So now let's talk about, oh wait, I did want to ask you one more thing. So talk to me a little, there's a bullet point on here about imposter syndrome. I wanted you to tell the students that we're with today, what is imposter syndrome and how did you find your way around it when you were in law school?
I wish I would have known about that. That's another thing I wish I would have known before I went into law school. So for me, my educational experience is, growing up and going to school and public school system in South Los Angeles. I was mostly always in a classroom with Latinos and Blacks. And I did not know what it would feel like to be in a classroom just with people from different walks of life. So going even to community college was the first time that I was in a classroom where my peers were white or from different just backgrounds. I had never interacted or socialized with anyone outside of these two groups. And so for me, I think I didn't realize that I was going to feel like such an outsider in the beginning. And that feeling kind of followed me a little bit through my educational experiences. Of course, as you can kind of already tell, there's that common theme that like nothing has stopped me, but I think I could have had a more enjoyable experience and maybe sometimes taken some opportunities that I was maybe too shy to take on sometimes. just because I felt like I had inexperience in relating. I was kind of inexperienced in relating and socializing with people from just different walks of life. And a lot of it also just came back to feeling like sometimes I didn't quite belong. I didn't have some, I would say, I guess sometimes I didn't feel as smart. And I didn't feel as equipped, especially when I realized my first year that I wasn't a very good writer. I thought, well, maybe I don't really belong here. And so that feeling kind of follows you throughout. And I didn't realize the magnitude or the toll that it was taking on me and the way that it impacted my confidence and my self-esteem. So when I approached a new venture, whether it was a new internship or an externship, I went in thinking, I can't fail. Like, I'm too afraid to fail. Failure is not an option. But I never thought I'm going to nail it. I'm just going to do great. And I think, working under that pressure of I can't fail versus feeling, and thinking that you're fully capable of doing it impacts the way you enjoy things. And so I wish I would have been a little bit more knowledgeable at that. I didn't know what imposter syndrome was until after I graduated law school. I think I would have sought the help that I needed to talk through it with someone. And so now the way that I deal with that is, sure, it still follows me every time I take another step forward in my career. And I have to pretty much hold on to the people that make me strong. And I have a very strong support system of other friends who are lawyers and practitioners, and people who have seen my growth and my involvement, for many, many years. And you have to remind yourself of everything that you have done right, all of the things that have made you successful, all of the lives that you have changed, all of the awards and the recognitions that you've earned in the past. And just know that you have every life is really because you earned it. And so I have to focus myself back and talk to myself and tell myself that I am worth it and that I am deserving of every opportunity that comes my way. And so, little by little, like I said, it follows me, but you get better at managing that little voice in the back of your head, and really keeping yourself grounded and knowing that, if you work for it, you're going to earn it. And a lot of doors are going to open, so enjoy them.
That's great advice, Karen. And obviously, you didn't let anything stop you, so congratulations again. Okay, so let's move now to your career post-law school. So talk to me a little bit, because I know you had a few stops along the way before you got to CHIRLA, so can take me through your career progression once you were done at Southwestern.
So through law school, like the PowerPoint mentions, I was an extern for the United States Department of Labor, Office of the Solicitor, where they did litigation work. I was also an intern for the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, and they basically enforced the Civil Rights Act of 1964, which says you can't discriminate folks at work based on certain protected categories. I was also a full-time judicial extern for the late Harry Pregerson at the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeal. And I had, a lot of nonprofit experience in between, with LACBA, with Learning Rights Law Center, where we helped students who have learning disabilities obtain the accommodations and the services that they need from the school district. And I also volunteered with A New Way of Life, helping folks expunge their records and get back on their feet at work. And so, yes, I was constantly looking for different opportunities to give back in the government and public interest.
And just so everyone knows, we have to go through these quickly because Karen has so much good advice today. We will post the links to all of them because these are all great organizations, but sorry to cut you off.
No, it's okay. And then, so I didn't quite know what to do. Then what I was faced with, I guess it's a good problem to have, but I had more options that I was anticipating, and I didn't quite know which direction to take my career. And so I have one mentor who's a great friend of mine, and she was doing estate planning, and she introduced me to her colleague who is also a fantastic attorney, and they said, you should really come and try something different. And they said our community is really in dire need of representation and Latino attorneys that do probate and trust work. And I remember thinking, well, this is the one thing I'm pretty sure I thought I would never practice. But if you're telling me that there's an opportunity and that, our community needs, some private attorneys to do this type of work, then I'll try it. And plus I'll be working with you guys, so why not? And I did, and I did it for about a year. But, I am glad that I quickly realized that it just wasn't for me. The private law setting is just not the same as public interest. I didn't like having to do billable hours. I didn't like to feel pressured to bring money in. So there's just certain things about the culture of working in a private firm that just weren't for me. And also just doing probate and trust litigation, I feel that it's where death and money intersect, and sometimes it can bring the worst out of people. So I was as empathetic and compassionate as I possibly could be, but I just had a hard trouble even just relating to some of the issues that my clients were going through. It was still a good learning experience for me, but I knew right away that it wasn't the direction I wanted to take my career in. And so I circled back to doing what was, the first thing that brought me to law school to begin with, which was doing nonprofit work. And thankfully, I kept in contact with my immigration law professor at Southwestern, who said, CHIRLA is hiring now. I will put in a word for you, just apply. And so sure enough, she did, and she advocated for me. I went for one interview, normally 2 are required, and I got hired immediately after that first interview. And,
there's an important, before we get to CHIRLA, because it's an amazing organization, I think there's an important lesson there for pre-law students, which was you had a really clear vision for your career moving forward. And I think it's admirable that you were able to stick to it, right? A lot of people would get derailed, private practice, big salaries, whatever else. And even though you kind of tried various things, it seems like you always came home to what you had planned to do in the first place.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, there's going to be so many people along the way, like myself, who are going to share their experiences and their advice. And a lot of people are very well intended to want to help you and bring you under their wing. And what's important is to really take a little bit of what everyone has to say and have it blend into what's right for you. And so, that's one of the things that you will learn along the way. It's that you don't necessarily have to follow one path or another. You can always change and move around if you need to, as long as you feel comfortable with the work that you're doing. So don't be afraid of that. I was there for 1 year and I said, enough, I'm going back to what I knew I wanted to do. And yeah.
And you're there, you made it. We call it achieving the dream for a reason. So let's dig in. So CHIRLA, the Coalition for Humane Immigrant Rights. Tell me about the organization, the mission, and what your job looks like.
So CHIRLA has been around since the 80s, and we focus exclusively on defending immigrant rights in the United States. And we are an organization consisting of at least 100 employees. We are broken up into different departments, the legal department being the largest of approximately 50 employees. So about half of CHIRLA is the legal department. We have other amazing departments as well that focus on public policy. They focus on civic engagement, community education, communications department, organizing. And we all, from these different fronts, are just a force to be reckoned with to fight for immigrant rights. And I am very proud of working at this organization. We do incredible work, and we are truly a family that has a vision and just a lot of strength and momentum to continue to advocate for immigrants across the nation. The legal department is broken up itself into different units because we do different types of work that just require different systems and processes. So we have one unit that does the DACA renewals and also the naturalization applications. We have another department that does family unity type work, like family petitions, and also humanitarian relief. And then we have that third department, which is the removal defense unit. And so the removal defense unit represents people who are in removal proceedings, formerly known as deportation proceedings. And so we go to court for folks who are detained and folks who are non-detained to ensure that they get due process in court and are able to stay in the United States.
And let's give, if you would help, I'd love to give some of the students out there a glimpse into kind of what Karen's life looks like. And maybe we could focus, I love the story. You were gracious enough to give us the story of your proudest moment at CHIRLA. Can you take us a little bit into like what a case looks like and what you were able to achieve in that circumstance?
Sure. So when I was first doing family unity work, we have, our leaders and the management at our organization are very competent risk takers. And so, we had one case that came through the door of, a person who had been granted humanitarian relief and, he was in the process of applying for permanent residency, but there was a discrepancy in his application. And so I had never done a motion to reconsider, which is basically saying, hey, there may be this discrepancy, but give us an opportunity to fix it so that this person can get his permanent residency. Please don't deny it and then put him in deportation proceedings. That would be terrible. And so I went with my managing attorney and we had a conversation about this case. It really pulled at my heartstrings. And she said, well, I recognize that you haven't done something like this before, but it's either us or no one. This person has less than a week to file for this motion to reconsider, and he has no money to pay anyone else. So it's either us or no one. And I said, okay, great. So I came back with the news that we were going to help this client, and we took on the case. And I cleared my calendar for the next week. I did a lot of research. I remember being up at 4, 5, 6, 7 in the morning, just making sure that I was putting the best, my best work product forward. Everything that I had ever worked to do, becoming a good writer, a good researcher, like this was the moment where it had to all pay off. And I wrote a motion that I was very proud of. My managing attorney was very satisfied with it as well. We filed it. And for a couple of months, we didn't hear back until we realized that we got a positive result, and I won that motion to reconsider. And so for me, what was very important from that moment is I think that was the first moment where I felt like a real attorney, because I was able to figure something out on my own that I had never done before and be successful. And so those are truly the most validating moments for me, because if I ever felt like I wasn't capable or unworthy or didn't belong in this field, it's moments like that when I realize that I truly do belong and that this is my purpose and that I am a good lawyer. And for me, that kind of changed the way that I do my work and the way that I see myself from there. Another thing that taught me is the importance of having managers who believe in you. And that's truly what I have found at this organization, that I have managers who give me a chance. I have managers who tell me that they believe I am talented. And just being, again, in that community that gives you strength is really what has, I think, contributed to a lot of the success that I've had at this organization. I have a great team.
That's awesome. What a story. And that's the glimpse that we're trying to give students into what life as a lawyer can actually look like. Lawyers are on the front line. You are quite literally the last line of defense for some of these people. Difference between getting deported and being able to stay. That's life-changing stuff. So thank you for sharing. Now, I did want to ask you, and this is immigration, obviously a hot topic in national politics and all the rest of it. I don't think the students really often get a chance to speak to somebody who's on the front lines actually working with the people who are impacted by these policies. I'd love for you to give a little bit of context, because I know for the rest of us, it's easy to see politicians using DACA and immigration policy as really a political pawn in negotiations and things like that. Can you give us a little context about how that impacts the people who are living under these different policies?
Sure. When I started doing immigration law, and I came into a time where it felt like we were doing emergency room lawyering. So really, the way that immigration law works is that there's statutes, right, law that is passed by Congress, but then you have these administrative agencies that pass rules on how they interpret the law. And so they can just, depending on who the president appoints, they're going to pass rules based on an agenda. And so a lot of these rules have been very strict, have made it just very difficult for nonprofits, private attorneys, and even clients to just put applications together. One of, I think, the most damaging rules that we have been facing is the public charge rule. And so what that means is that, the government, this is a rule that has been around for the inception of immigration law, that basically says that, the government doesn't want people who are going to be a burden on society by requesting public assistance, for example. And, how you can tell whether someone's going to request public assistance now or in the future, it's almost impossible. And so they've pretty much set up what we refer to as wealth tests, right? They want people to have a certain, proficiency in English, and to have a certain credit score, to, be able to show bank statements with, savings. They want to be able to, put all of these ridiculous requirements on people who, may not quite be there yet because of their status, right? I mean, how can you ask someone to meet a certain income baseline when they don't have a work authorization? I mean, those two things are very contradictory. If you're undocumented and you're not supposed to work, then how could you impose an income requirement on an annual basis in order for them to apply for permanent residency? It just doesn't make any sense. And also that, to me, just this wealth test that is imposed by the public charge rule, it really, diminishes like what the immigrant in the United States can actually grow to achieve. I mean, my mother also came here as an immigrant. And at that time, she didn't speak English. She didn't have a credit score. She didn't have, good income. But she's a homeowner now. She has a lawyer as a daughter. She has a registered nurse as a daughter. She has a 401k now. So it didn't mean that progress didn't come. It just means that progress comes slowly. And what these rules do is that they limit the people's ability to even try to work hard to get to where they need to. And so, it makes it difficult for us to sometimes file these applications in the affirmative, knowing that if they don't meet all of these stringent requirements, that they could potentially be denied and be put in removal proceedings.
Well, Karen, I love the way your story comes full circle. And bringing it back to your mom and how you grew up and you saw some of these systemic inequalities, and how the system essentially makes it impossible for people to thrive. And now you're working against those same systems. So it's a really great story. Thank you for sharing. Now, some of the students who we have with us today who are moved by your story and the mission, are there any ways that they could get involved with CHIRLA?
Sure. Our legal department, under the circumstances that we're experiencing right now, everyone is working from home. And so, we have taken some externs, that are law students, to help us in the fight, and representing, immigrants in deportation proceedings. I know that other departments in CHIRLA also take externs and maybe even some interns. I don't know what the process is like right now, the onboarding process, just because of the circumstances that we're under. But I think once things go back to normal, there are a lot of opportunities for people to be involved, to become first of all, a CHIRLA member. We are a member-driven organization, and to participate in the a lot of the activities that we have going on. We have a gala where we fundraise money. Organizing is always putting on events to bring attention to these issues, and so there are so many different ways to get involved with our organization, and I do encourage people to stay on top of those opportunities that are often posted on the website, but that will become more available once we get through this tough time.
Everything is a little bit more challenging.
Yes, everything is a little bit more challenging right
now. Normal times, get involved, and it's a really awesome organization. So. But there are other things that I would love Karen to take a few moments to share as well. That's not all that Karen does. So let's talk about, you also took a role as an adjunct professor at Southwestern. So can you tell everyone a little bit about what you do there, how you got involved, and what your position looks like?
Sure. So very recently, I want to say maybe 2-3 years ago, the American Bar Association changed the rules for students who do externships. So the difference between an internship and an externship, it's similar in a way that you're volunteering at an organization and you're getting hands-on experience as a student. But when you do an externship, you're actually getting units. And so say that you're supposed to have 12 units for a semester. 9 units of those may be just regular substantive courses. And then 3 units could be actually doing work out in the field. And so what's now required is that for students who do externships, that they have a class component where they have to check in with a professor, attend lectures, write certain guided reflections, put a list of their goals together that they hope to accomplish by the end of their externship experience. And so my position as an adjunct professor is to cover important topics that law students may not be aware of, or don't really have anyone to talk to about. Some of it being compassion fatigue, which is definitely something that we can experience in the field, when you're hearing so many different stories of, people who are escaping their persecutors in their home countries, and, they're here and life is still difficult to adjust to, and all of a sudden you become the only person who is helping them just gain some stability in this country. It can take a toll on an attorney. So learning about that, learning about compassion fatigue, learning about the time of COVID as well. All of us are working from home, and working from home sometimes is nice, but having to work from home every day for a couple of months, it becomes something that is important to talk about so that you can create work-life balance. And so we cover different topics that, fall into the world of doing public interest work. And for me, it's just very gratifying to have these conversations with the students and, build them to be proactive about asking for these, for important assignments that are going to help them grow as students and eventually professionally.
Yeah, it sounds like a very important service for people who are interested in pursuing a career of public interest. Do you, so now that you're on the other side of that relationship, so obviously you were a law student, now you are looking at mentoring, teaching law students. Any other advice that you would give to people, specifically those who are interested in going into a career in public interest?
Sure. So, a lot of the things that I have, seen, or some of the observations that I made in my first semester of teaching, I remember having some students say, oh, well, I didn't know that I could be so proactive in asking for certain things as an extern. And so what I, tell students is that, in particular, when you are an extern, you are paying for this education. It's yours. and you can take some control over what you want to learn. And there's nothing wrong about being proactive and asking for specific assignments, just like I did when I was a student, asking specifically to write. If you want client interaction, ask for that too. It shows interest, it shows drive, it shows initiative. And ultimately what you want not only is to have that experience, but also to open the doors for careers. You know, why not think about whether this is a place you would like to come back to in the future, or even think about, you know, this place being a launching pad to a different organization that you have your eye on. And so I think it's very important to treat your academic experiences really as the foundation for your career. You know, think of yourself outside, outside of being a student. Think of yourself as a lawyer the minute that you walk into law school, the minute that you start forming relationships with the people who supervise you, and the paralegals that you work with, and the secretaries that you work with. Sometimes, you know, the best relationships are going to be with the staff. And so, you know, knowing how to navigate those waters can really open up the doors post-graduation. So my best advice is, yes, you are a student, but start envisioning yourself as that attorney the minute that you get into law school.
That's great advice. Yeah, plot your path and fight for it. It's you know, it's your passion to pursue. So that's great. Now, one more. I know you're also involved with the Mexican American Bar Foundation. Can you tell me a little bit about that organization and what you do there?
Yes. So the Mexican American Bar Foundation has been around now for about 29 years. I became involved with MABA through my civil procedure professor, Christopher Cameron, who was then the gala director. And, you know, he asked me to come on board and help out with putting the program book together for the gala. And since then, that was in 2012, I've been involved through the present. And so every year, this board that consists of amazing, talented, intelligent, selfless attorneys and judges that come from different areas. You know, some do corporate law, some do employment law, some are prosecutors. And so they all come together to fundraise money all year. It's a year-long effort to bring money together and support the dreams of first-generation Latino law students in certain schools like Pepperdine, USC, Loyola, Southwestern, and UCLA, and UC Irvine. I'm not sure if I mentioned that, but they fundraise money, and they have given away millions and millions of dollars over the course of all these years. And they, every year we do this, we put on this great gala where everyone comes, and it's just a great way to reconnect with those in the community. And we recognize these scholars for their hard work and their commitment to giving back to the community. And then we also honor some of the trailblazers in the legal field as well. This year, we're going to do a virtual gala because we can't meet in person. But we hope to one day be able to get back to doing these galas in person. I think it's a very fun way to recognize students and celebrate their accomplishments and contribute with these $10,000 scholarships that they can use for any of their law school expenses.
Yeah, sounds like a great organization. We're all trying to figure out this virtual world. So even a virtual gala gives people a chance to dress up and do something.
Yes.
Those are incredible numbers. The scholarships that you give out, I'm sure those are life-changing for students. So.
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. Well, Karen, we are running short on time. I knew you had a lot to say, but I would like to give you a chance, and just, you've given so much great advice to pre-law students. I think we touched on working on writing, doing your homework, get involved with organizations, and really a lot of helpful advice for people interested in pursuing a career in public interest law. Is there anything that we missed? Any other final words of advice you would give to students who might be interested in learning more?
Yes, this is once you start law school, this career is going to follow you if you choose to practice and be an attorney till the moment you retire. You're going to do this for many, many years. And so it's a marathon. And take it that way. It's very important to take care of yourself along the way. I'm not saying this because I'm perfect at it. I haven't quite mastered it, but I do think that it is incredibly important not to sacrifice your body and your family and the things that really do matter in life as you go on to this trajectory. It's a tough job. It comes with so much responsibility. I often say I don't control my life, the court does. And when there's a court deadline or a court hearing, it doesn't matter what's happening or what I'm doing, I have to show up. And so it's very rewarding, but it takes a lot of commitment. It takes a lot of discipline. And so you have to find a way to make sure to take care of the things that really do matter in life. Spending time with family, exercising, sleeping, eating healthy, all of these things that are going to make this job sustainable for you in the long run. So I would say that as early as law school, start to develop a routine for yourself that, makes it a lifestyle for you so that you can take care of yourself and that way you can help others. I know that a lot of people might be thinking, well, money is important. Money used to be a lot on my mind as well, just because I felt the responsibility to have to give back to my mother and help her with expenses so that she didn't have to work too much. And, obviously have to pull myself up too. But I really do want to say that things work out. I just bought a house. I'm a new homeowner with my sister. And so, thank you. I never thought this would be possible, especially having a career in public interest law. But, CHIRLA recognizes, how hard we work, and my salary is, I have a very competitive salary, and I'm able to have the things that I need. So if there's one thing that life has taught me is to really follow your passion. And when you put in all of the work and all of the time necessary to master your craft, the money will come because people will notice and hear about you. And so focus on just being good at what you do, very good at what you do. Take on the opportunities that come your way. I didn't have a background as an educator, so being an adjunct professor was kind of scary to me, but I thought, you know what? I am going to figure it out just like I have everything else. And sure enough, I did. So these opportunities are going to come your way. Take them and be very good at it. And then for those of you who are first generation, just know that, you're not alone. There are other people who feel the exact same way as you. Look for people who are transparent and vulnerable and willing to share their stories with you. And just always remind yourself that you are completely worth all of the opportunities and all of the successes that come along the way.
Wow. Powerful words, Karen. I am sure you have been and will be successful in anything that you try. So drive, passion, work hard. It really makes, it makes everything else feel easier. So thank you so much for those final words for everybody out there. So I wanted to thank you one more time, Karen. You've been an amazing guest, really great words of wisdom for all the students out there. It's a truly inspiring story. So congratulations on all the success, and thank you for being with us here today.
Thank you so much. Have a great rest of your weekend.
Thanks, Karen.
Bye.